Welcome back. Tonight I have three accounts from real people who responded to Craigslist listings and walked into situations they were completely unprepared for. Three separate people, three separate listings, three separate moments where a simple decision to click on a post and type out a reply almost ended in something none of them could have walked back from. I want you to stay with me through all three of these because each one escalates in a way that the previous one does not. And the third story in particular is one that I have been sitting on for a while because every time I think about the detail that broke it all open, I have to take a second before I can keep talking. Before we get into story one, drop a comment and let me know where you are listening from tonight. And if true scary stories are your thing and you were not subscribed yet, hit that button now. New stories go up every single week, and I do not want you missing any of them. Story one, the moving job. My name is Marcus. I was 24 years old when this happened, and I was living in Charlotte, North Carolina. I want to paint a picture of where I was in life at that point because I think it matters for understanding why I took the job in the first place. I was working part-time at a print shop on East Trade Street, maybe 22 hours a week, making just enough to cover rent in a two-bedroom apartment I shared with a coworker named Felix. Felix was solid quiet, paid his half, on time, but the print shop money on its own was never going to stretch far enough when something unexpected came up. Car insurance renewal, a medical copay, a busted phone screen. I was the kind of broke that's not desperate, but is always aware, always calculating, always looking for the next small income source to fill in the gaps. That is what Craigslist was to me. A supplement. I had a 2007 Ford F-15. Oh, that burned a little oil and had a crack running across the lower corner of the windshield that I kept promising myself I would fix. That truck was my main asset in the gig section, moving, help hauling junkyard cleanup dump runs. I had done probably 15 or 20 jobs through Craigslist over the prior year, and almost all of them were completely normal. You show up, you move heavy things, you get cash, you drive home. Nothing about that history made me suspicious of the next listing. The post was simple. Needed two strong people to help move furniture and boxes from a house to a storage unit. Saturday, only full day, pays $200 cash per person. Must have or have access to a truck. That was basically it. No long description, no unusual requirements. The kind of listing I had answered a dozen times before without thinking twice. I had a truck. My friend Devin had helped me with two of my own moves, and I owed him a favor, or he owed me one. Honestly, I cannot remember anymore which direction it went. Either way, I texted him, and he said he was in. The man who responded to my message went by Ray. He came back to me in under 10 minutes, which at the time I read as enthusiasm, someone glad their listing was getting replies. He texted me an address in the Steel Creek area of Charlotte, said to be there at 7 in the morning. Wear clothes, I did not mind getting dirty. Bring work gloves if I had them. The message was organized and polite. He confirmed the 200 cash per person. Normal, routine. I put his number in my phone under moving job sat and set my alarm for 5:45. Devin backed out at 6:47 Saturday morning. His girlfriend had some kind of family situation blow up overnight, and he could not get out of it. I was irritated, but I did not panic. I texted Ray to let him know it would just be me coming and asked if that was still okay. He replied within 2 minutes. He said no problem at all, just him anyway. Light work still happy to pay the same. I read that and felt fine. I grabbed a coffee from the gas station on my way and headed out. I want to describe what I noticed as I drove down the private road toward the property, because I think the details matter. The road itself was unpaved at the end, gravel turning to packed dirt with the tall pine trees on both sides that were close enough together that the branches interlocked overhead and the sky nearly disappeared. It was about 8:30 in the morning and already warm for September, but it was noticeably cooler under those trees. Darker. The kind of road that takes you out of one world and puts you somewhere else before you have made a conscious decision to go there. The house at the end of the road was old. Beige vinyl siding that had gone slightly gray from weather and time. A covered front porch with a ceiling fan that was not moving, and a gutter on the left side hanging down at a 45-degree angle from one loose bracket. The blinds on every window I could see were closed. Not partially open, fully shut, pulled all the way down, the kind of close that suggests either someone who sleeps in total darkness or someone who does not want anyone to see what is inside. What I registered next was the absence of anything that should have been there. When someone is moving out of a house, you see evidence of it before you even get out of your car. Boxes stacked on the porch. Furniture wrapped in moving blankets propped against the railing. A pile of garbage bags of things that did not make the cut. The outside of the house is always the first chapter of the move. This house had nothing. The porch was empty. The yard was still. There was no indication that any packing had happened at all. Ray came out the front door while I was still sitting in the truck processing this. He was a white male, maybe mid to late 40s, medium build, around 5'10", wearing a gray zip-up hoodie despite the heat and dark jeans. He smiled and raised one hand in a wave. I got out and we shook hands when I reached the porch, and his hand was noticeably cold. Not cold like he had been standing in air conditioning. Cold like his circulation was off, or like he had been somewhere much cooler than the outside air for a while. He thanked me for coming out and held the front door open, and I stepped inside. The interior of the house stopped me before I had fully cleared the doorway. The living room was essentially empty. A single folding chair against one wall. A card table with nothing on it. That was it. No couch, no bookshelf, no television, no end tables, no pictures on the walls, no nothing. Down the hallway, I could see through an open door to what I assumed was the bedroom. A mattress on the floor with no frame, no bedding, nothing. The house had the feel of a place that had been cleared out already, not a place that was in the process of being cleared. I asked him where the furniture was that he needed moved. He said it was mostly in the basement. Equipment and boxes he had been keeping in storage down there for a long time. Wanted it all moved to a unit about 12 miles east. He walked me through the kitchen to a door in the back wall and opened it. The stairs went straight down into dark. He reached in past the doorframe and found the switch, and a single bare bulb at the bottom of the stairs flickered on. It threw a circle of yellow light on a concrete floor and the bottom 2 steps, and nothing else. The rest of the basement was shadow. I stood at the top of those stairs and looked down. And something happened in my body that I am not going to dress up with dramatic language. There was no voice in my head. There was no clear thought. There was just a physical response, something in my sternum, something low in my gut, something that preceded language entirely. It was the same thing that happens when you are walking somewhere at night and you hear a sound and your body stops moving before your brain has processed what the sound was. That thing, that response, it went off standing at the top of those basement stairs, looking down into that partial dark, with this man standing 3 feet to my right, waiting for me to go down. I told him I needed to grab my gloves from the truck. He said sure, he would wait right here. I walked to the front door at a pace I was very conscious of keeping normal and unhurried. I pushed the screen door open and walked across the porch and down to my truck. I got in the cab. I picked up my phone and I texted Devin everything I just described in about 40 seconds of fast typing, and then I typed out the full address and sent it. Then I sent a second message that said, "If you do not hear from me in 30 minutes, call the police and give them this address." Devin called me back in 58 seconds. He did not ask me to walk him through it again. He said, "Do not go back in there." He said, "Get in your truck and leave right now." He said, "Trust what you are feeling," because what I was describing was not a normal moving job, and we both knew it. I was still sitting there with the phone against my ear when I looked up through the windshield and saw Ray standing in the front doorway of the house. He had come out without making a sound that I heard from inside the truck. He was not smiling. He was not calling out to ask what was taking so long. He was just standing in the doorframe with his arms at his sides, completely still, looking directly at me through the windshield with an expression that was completely flat. No curiosity, no impatience, no performance of normalcy. Just watching. Like someone who had done this before and knew there was no point in rushing the end of it. I turned the key. The engine started first try. I shifted into reverse and backed down that road, looking in the rearview mirror the entire time. When I came to the end of the private road and turned onto the paved street, I looked back one more time, and Ray had walked to the end of the driveway. He was standing at the property line watching my truck until I was out of sight. He did not follow. He did not chase. He did not call. He just watched. I stayed on the phone with Devin for the entire 40-minute drive back into the city. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my jaw hurt from clenching it without realizing. That afternoon, I called the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police non-emergency line and gave a full report. The address, the man's first name, his phone number, the empty house, the basement, the single bare bulb, the way he stood in the doorway watching me leave. The officer on the line took everything down and said they would follow up. 3 weeks later, I received a call from a Charlotte detective. He was professional and brief. He told me the address had come up in connection with a separate ongoing investigation and that my report had been useful. He thanked me for making the call and ended the conversation. He gave me nothing else. I searched that address for months. Local news archives, county property records, anything I could find publicly. I found nothing that told me what had been at the bottom of those stairs. Just that one call from a detective and the word useful echoing around in my head ever since. I still check the back seat of my truck every single time I get in. Every time. I do not think about it consciously. My hand just reaches back and pats the seat before I close the door. Every single time. Some things install themselves in you without asking permission. Story 2, the couch. My name is Adrian. I was 31 years old and living alone in a one-bedroom apartment in Tempe, Arizona when this happened. I had just ended a 4-year relationship and moved out of the place I had shared with my ex, and I was in the process of building my life back from scratch in a new apartment that was entirely mine. New furniture, new plants, new start. Part of that reset meant getting rid of the sectional couch my ex and I had bought together at a Rooms to Go in Scottsdale. It was a good couch. L-shaped, slate gray microfiber, barely 2 years old. No stains, no damage. But every time I sat on it, I thought about the wrong things. So I listed it on Craigslist for $250 with 4 clear photos. The responses came in fast and most of them were useless. People trying to talk me down to $120. One guy who sent me a long message about how much couches depreciate and why $200 was already too generous on my part. I ignored most of it, but one message stood apart. Polite and clear, full asking price, could pick up Saturday afternoon, would bring a friend with a truck. Oh, his name was Tyler. We exchanged a few texts and everything felt normal. I confirmed Saturday at 2 in the afternoon. Tyler arrived alone. No friend, no truck. Just him in a silver 4-door sedan. He was maybe 30 average build, clean cut, wearing a light blue button-up with the sleeves rolled to the elbows. He explained that his friend had canceled last minute, a totally believable thing, and asked if he could come in to measure the couch to make sure it would fit in an alternative vehicle he was going to borrow the following day. That request made enough logical sense in the moment that I stepped back from the door and let him in. He was inside my apartment for about 15 minutes. He moved around the couch, slowly crouching, to look at the leg construction pressing on the cushions, asking me about the manufacturer. He pulled out his phone and held it at arm's length like he was taking measurements. But the angle was wrong. When you measure a piece of furniture with your phone, you point the camera at the furniture. His phone was consistently pointing outward, away from the couch, toward other parts of the room. I noticed it pointing at my bookshelf along the far wall. I noticed it pointing toward the hallway that leads to my bedroom. I noticed it pointing at the window behind the couch and what was visible through it, which was the parking lot and the exterior staircase of my building. I told myself I was being paranoid. He was friendly and easy to talk to. He asked me how long I had lived in the complex, whether I liked the neighborhood, whether I was moving, or just redecorating. I answered his questions. He left after 15 minutes and said he would text me about Sunday pickup. He texted Sunday evening with an excuse. Work conflict, really sorry, could we push to Wednesday? I said, okay. Monday morning, I received a direct message on Instagram from a woman named Claire, who explained she had found my profile through a neighborhood watch Facebook group and needed to show me something. She sent me screenshots of posts from a private online forum I had never heard of. In those posts, a user had uploaded photographs. I recognized my apartment in the first one immediately. My bookshelf was clearly visible in the background. The book's spines readable, a distinctive ceramic vase on the second shelf that I bought at a market in Flagstaff 2 years ago. The second photo showed my kitchen doorway, the hanging light fixture above the counter visible. The third photo showed the view out my living room window, the parking lot, the staircase, the unit numbers on the doors visible across the courtyard. Alongside the photos, the user had written posts about what they described as my observable routine. The approximate time I left my apartment in the mornings, based on when they saw lights go off. The time I typically returned in the evenings, based on when the lights came back on. Notes about whether my lights stayed on past 11 at night. Notes about whether I appeared to have regular visitors. A thread of posts that read like a surveillance log assembled from the photographs Tyler had taken while standing inside my home, measuring my couch. I sat on the floor next to my kitchen counter and read those screenshots 3 times, and each time I read them, I felt the air in the room get smaller. I called Tempe police that evening, and an officer was at my door within 45 minutes. I showed him everything. The screenshots Claire had sent me the Craigslist listing the text exchange with Tyler, his full name and number. The officer took photos of my phone screen and filed a report. He told me they would contact Tyler and look into the forum posts. Wednesday came. I had called in sick to work. I was home when the knock kept at my door at 2:17 in the afternoon. I looked through the peephole, and it was Tyler. He stood in the hallway with his hands in the front pockets of his jeans weight, slightly back on his heels, looking at my door with an expression that was patient in a way that felt deliberate. He knocked again after about 40 seconds. He waited. 2 full minutes I watched him stand there through the peephole without moving significantly. Then he turned and walked toward the stairwell. 2 hours later, he sent me a text that said, "Hey, just stopped by. Hope everything is okay." I never responded. I changed my number the following morning. A detective called me 10 days later. He said they had spoken with Tyler and issued a formal warning. He explained that because no physical contact had occurred, and because the forum posts had been deleted before they could be formally documented, there was insufficient evidence for charges at this time. He advised me to report any further contact immediately. I installed 2 cameras in my apartment that week, a deadbolt guard on the front door. I have not listed anything on Craigslist since, and I have not posted interior photos of my apartment on any public platform. The couch is still in my living room. I never sold it. I never tried again, and I will tell you honestly that I cannot sit on the far left cushion anymore, the one closest to where Tyler was standing, when I noticed his phone pointing at my bookshelf without feeling something I do not have a word for, something between anger and fear and a violation that does not go away just because nothing technically happened. Meet in a public place, a grocery store parking lot, a police department exchange zone, a busy strip mall with cameras everywhere. Do not let a stranger inside your home to look at something you are selling. It does not matter how normal they seem. Normal is what people perform when they need access. Story 3. The Room for Rent. My name is Joel. I was 22 years old, a junior at Arizona State, studying communications when this happened. My situation was straightforward and urgent. My roommate, a guy named Brett, who I had known since freshman orientation, dropped out of school in the middle of the semester without giving me more than a few days' notice. No explanation that made complete sense, no plan for the rent, just boxes out the door, and a forwarding address in his hometown of Flagstaff. The lease was in both our names, but the landlord made clear very quickly that the practical responsibility fell on whoever was still occupying the unit, which was me. I had 3 weeks to either find a replacement roommate, negotiate something with the landlord who was not interested in negotiating, or find a new place entirely that I could afford on my own. I was not in a position to cover the full rent solo. The math simply did not work. I had a part-time job at the campus recreation center working the front desk 20 hours a week, and a small scholarship stipend that covered tuition but not much else. I started searching for a room I could rent on my own immediately, and because I was broke and the timeline was short, I went to Craigslist. I filtered by price range low to high and started working through the listings. Most of what came up at the lower end was obviously uninhabitable or came with conditions that read like red flags dressed up in neutral language. Basement rooms with no windows described as cozy and private. A woman listing a room who required all potential tenants to attend a weekly household meeting and submit to a 60-day trial period before signing anything. A man who wrote in all capital letters that he ran a tight ship and expected the same and listed 9 separate rules, including a prohibition on female visitors after 7 in the evening. I scrolled past all of it. Then I found the listing. A furnished room in a house in Mesa. $500 a month with all utilities included. I want you to understand how low that number was. In the Mesa and Tempe area at that time, a furnished room with utilities included typically rented for $800 to $1,200 a month depending on location and condition. $500 was less than half the market rate. I knew that. I registered it as unusual even in the moment of reading. But the listing was well written. The sentences were complete. The grammar was clean. The tone was calm and professional. The landlord described himself as a professional who traveled frequently for work and was looking for a quiet, responsible tenant, preferably a student or young professional, someone who kept to themselves and treated the space with respect. There was one photograph, a clean, plainly furnished bedroom, a standard bed frame, a wooden desk pushed against the wall, a window on the far side with natural light coming through from what looked like a side yard. Nothing alarming in the image, nothing out of place. I messaged within 5 minutes of finding the listing. The response came back in under an hour from someone named Gary. He thanked me for reaching out, confirmed the room was still available, and asked if I wanted to come see it that evening, around 6:30. I said yes without hesitation. I want to describe the drive over because there is something about the normalcy of it that I keep coming back to. It was a Tuesday evening in late October. The light was going golden the way it does in Arizona in the fall, low and warm across the flat grid of residential streets. I had the windows down. I was listening to something on the radio. I cannot remember what. I was thinking about whether I should bring my laptop to show Gary my student ID and confirm I was a legitimate tenant. It felt like an errand, a chore to get through on the way to solving my problem and getting back to the rest of my life. The house was on a standard residential block. Ranch-style tan stucco exterior, a two-car garage, a small cactus garden in the front yard that someone had clearly maintained with some care. It looked like dozens of other houses on dozens of other streets in Mesa. Nothing about the exterior produced any feeling in me at all. It just looked like a house. Gary was already at the front door when I came up the driveway, which in retrospect I think meant he had been watching from a window and came to the door at the exact moment I reached it so that I would not have time to stand on the porch and look around before he opened up. He was a heavy-set man, probably late 50s or early 60s with silver-rimmed glasses, thinning gray hair combed to one side, and a blue polo shirt tucked into khaki pants. He shook my hand with both of his and used my first name when he greeted me. He had that manner of someone who is very good at performing warmth without generating it. Friendly in the way of a salesman who has done this enough times that it no longer requires any real feeling. He walked me through the living room and kitchen. Both were clean and orderly. The living room had a couch and a television and a coffee table with a stack of magazines on it. The kitchen had dishes on a drying rack and a bowl of fruit on the counter. It looked lived in, but there was no evidence of another person currently occupying the house. No shoes by the door. No personal items on the counter. No second set of dishes. He explained this by telling me he had been traveling and had just returned that day, which answered the question I had not yet asked. He walked me down the hall to the room. The door was closed and he turned the handle and pushed it open and gestured for me to go in first. The room matched the photograph. Bed-frame desk window on the far wall. Clean carpet white walls overhead, light on a switch by the door. My first impression was that it was fine. Plain but adequate. And then my eyes went to the window. The window had a lock on it that was not a standard window latch. A standard window latch sits on the inside of the frame, operated from within the room, allowing the person inside to lock themselves in or unlock and open the window as they choose. This lock was different. It was a sliding bar mechanism, the kind typically mounted horizontally on the inside of a door to prevent the door from being pushed open from the outside, except this one was mounted on the exterior of the window frame, on the outside, which meant the only person who could slide it and lock or unlock it was someone standing outside the room, looking in at the window from the yard. I kept my face calm. I did not stop moving or react in a way that indicated I'd seen anything unusual. I turned and walked toward the closet and slid the door open and looked at the hanging rod in the shelf above it. Then I moved back toward the hallway door to look at the room from the other angle the way you do when you are just getting a feel for the space. That is when I saw the second lock. The door had a standard interior privacy lock, the small twist knob on the inside that lets you lock yourself in. But there was also a deadbolt, a keyed deadbolt installed on the hallway side of the door frame, a deadbolt that required a key to operate and that could only be operated from outside the room by someone standing in the hall. The room had no lock that a person inside could control. Both locks, the window and the door, could only be operated from outside. I crouched down near the bed like I was checking the condition of the carpet near the baseboard heater. And that is where I found the last thing. At floor level, along the lower section of the baseboard, running under the window, there were scratch marks in the white paint. Long, thin, shallow gouges, several of them overlapping, running in a downward direction, consistent with something being dragged across the surface repeatedly. At a height and angle, consistent with a person lying on the floor with their hands against the wall. More than one set. The grooves were at slightly different depths and angles, which told me they had not all been made at the same time. I stood back up. Gary was leaning against the doorframe with his arms folded loosely across his chest, still wearing that easy practice smile. He asked me what I thought of the room. I told him it seemed nice and that I wanted to take a day to run the numbers and talk to my parents before committing. He nodded like that was a completely expected and reasonable thing to say. He reached into his shirt pocket and handed me a folded piece of paper with his name and his cell number written on it in blue pen. He walked me back to the front door and told me not to wait too long because he had a few other people interested. I got in my car. I drove 2 blocks east and pulled into the parking lot of a Walgreens and sat there with the engine running. My hands on the wheel were not shaking, but something else was happening in my body, a kind of sustained, full-body alertness that made every sound in the parking lot feel significant. I had taken 3 photographs while Gary's back was turned: the outside-mounted window lock, the exterior deadbolt on the hallway side of the doorframe, the scratch marks on the baseboard. I called my friend Reyes. I walked him through everything in order: the price, the house, the tour, the window lock, the door deadbolt, the scratch marks. Reyes listened to all of it without saying anything until I finished. Then he said quietly, and without dramatizing it, that I needed to call the police that night and that I should not contact Gary again for any reason. I filed the report with the Mesa Police Department at 8:40 that same evening. I gave the officer on duty Gary's full name, the address, the phone number from the folded paper, and I sent all 3 photographs to the email address the officer provided me. He looked at the photos on his own phone after I sent them and was quiet for several seconds before he said he was going to forward these to someone else on the team and that I should not reach out to the landlord again. I never received a formal follow-up call from the Mesa Police Department, but 6 weeks later, a woman in a neighborhood Facebook group covering that part of Mesa made a post about a house on that specific street being the subject of an active police investigation. She did not include specific details or confirm what the investigation involved. The post gathered over 200 comments within a few hours before it was removed by a moderator or by the poster herself. I do not know which. I found a room through Reyes 2 weeks after visiting that house. I paid more per month than I had been hoping to spend. I paid it without a single complaint. I think about that room in Mesa more than I want to admit. Not every day, but regularly. Not because of what I saw happening there, because of what I almost did. I almost talked myself out of what I was seeing. I almost stood there and thought, there's probably a reasonable explanation for this. I am probably overthinking it. This is a good deal, and I need a place to live. I came that close to being the person who sits down at that desk and closes that door behind them and hears a key turn in the lock from the other side. If a price seems impossible, there is always a reason for it. And sometimes the reason is the kind you do not walk away from. That is 3 stories, 3 listings, 3 people who made ordinary decisions about buying, selling, and renting, and came closer to something terrible than any of them ever expected to when they opened their laptops and started scrolling. The vast majority of Craigslist transactions are completely uneventful, but the ones that are not tend to be built carefully designed to look routine, priced to attract people who are in a hurry or stretched thin or just trying to solve a simple problem. They're designed around the assumption that you will not stop to ask the obvious question, or that by the time you do, it will already be too late to matter. Ask the question anyway. Trust the thing in your body that goes quiet and still before your brain has even finished forming the thought. And if you are ever in a room where you realize the locks only work from the outside, do not wonder, do not hesitate. Do not try to be polite about it. Just go. Drop your own story in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you made it all the way to the end of this video, you know what to do. Subscribe, hit the bell, and I will see you in the next one. Stay aware and stay safe.